as ambassador to Vietnam under President Johnson, a Democrat. Were the voters of New Hampshire wrong to make that decision?
I think the voters of New Hampshire today would not make that decision. I think there's a very different climate in the world, and I think that if that situation came up, Senator Lodge, former senator from Massachusetts, then Ambassador Lodge, would not do as well.
Well, unfortunately, I think you'd have to say that Huntsman is right when he said, to quote him actually here, verbatim, "This nation is divided, David," he said to David Gregory, "because of attitudes like that." And I think what you just reflected is that we're living in a country that has a very bad attitude to the kind we had back even in the very divisive 1960s. And that's a bad comment about the nature of the electorate right now, sir.
People are angry. People are angry at the policies that are reflected by this administration, and they are not supportive of somebody who, in serving that administration, supports those policies. That's what the issue is. It's supporting bad policies.
Okay. Thank you, Governor. It's always good to have you on. Governor John Sununu, a
nice to be on, Chris. Have a nice day.
Surrogate for Mitt Romney. Thank you for coming on, sir, from the debate side. It's safe. Let's go to David Gregory, moderator of Meet the Press, who moderated today's debate. I have to say, let me be the first. It was an electric debate. It was highly charged. And your moderating skills, I think, played a major role in activating the candidates to be at their best. I give you that encomium for Sunday morning greatness. I have to say you've done it again, David. Anyway, what is your reaction to the performance by the candidate? And what do you think you learned as a newsman?
Well, I do think that tone was a big role. I mean, I think that it was clear from the start, both by where I was trying to lead the candidates, but certainly where they picked up the ball and ran with it, that they were trying to slow Romney down. I mean, they recognized if you were not Romney, you had to do something to try to slow him down. And so, as you just referred to the debate about running for politics, for quite a long time, being a career politician, that back and forth. I have to say, there may have been a little bit more heat than light. Even Newt Gingrich, who says that Romney is unelectable, still has some bullet points about what he sees as a moderate record. And I don't know that they sort of line up point to point about what the record actually was for Governor Romney. But it was very clear that whether it was just process, just argument, there was an attempt now to come right at him and say, you're not for real. You're not authentic as a conservative. You're not authentic as a guy who's an outsider who can take us on and sort of pick up the mantle of the Republican Party. And ultimately, you are too compromised, ultimately, to go against President Obama. I think that argument was made, and I think everybody was ready to come and make that argument today.
Here's Howard Fineman, David.
I wondered, David, if there's anything that really surprised you. You were right there within a few feet of them. You were asking very tough questions. They were going after each other. What surprised you about either the dynamics or the content of what they said today?
Well, I think what surprised me a little bit is that Governor Romney, who my thought from last night on that other debate was that he was trying to be very cool, trying to be above the fray. I think he was happy to see that Paul and Santorum were sparring. I think here he understood, A, that he was very much a target and there was no getting around it, and that he had to fight back. And I just saw a lot more fight in him today, just as a stylistic piece and seeing them up close. And certainly at the end there between Romney and Gingrich, I thought that was striking. And look, but here's another point, and I do think this is important substantively. Politicians go around and in these debates and they say, let's not be superficial. Let's talk in great depth. Let's tell the American people what they want to know. And instead of answering questions about what painful cuts they're going to make, there becomes kind of an attack on the commentariat. Or if it was Governor Perry, really that's the answer, that he's going to surprise Republicans by calling for a balanced budget amendment. I don't think that's bucking the orthodoxy of the party. I also don't think we learned a lot about how these candidates can do what Bush and Obama were unable to do, and that is actually change the way Washington works to get results. I think that they have to bear in mind, people expect results. They expect things to be accomplished, and that's just not happening in Washington.
David, I think in closing, I want to congratulate you again on the substance in this case. I think you got a lot out of them in terms of means testing, the wealthy. I mean, all of them seem to chime in there. That's a tough one for a Republican audience perhaps to hear, but I thought they were all very forthcoming in that regard. David, congratulations on an amazing performance.
Thank you very much,
I think
Chris.
there's a lot of substance we're going to be getting out of this as we study the transcript. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Howard Fineman, my colleagues of Lore, and Eugene Robinson, of course, from the Washington Post. Up Up next, more from the campaigns, the candidates, and more analysis from us. You're watching MSNBC's coverage. What a great morning for NBC and MSNBC. We're talking about the Republican presidential debate just held here in Manchester, New Hampshire, just 2 days before the New Hampshire primary.
Let me answer the question that you asked earlier. What are the three areas that you would make some reductions that people would feel some pain? And I would tell you it would be those bureaucrats at the Department of Commerce and Energy and Education that we're going to do away with.
First of all, with respect to Governor Romney, you know, there are a lot of people who are tuning in this morning, and I'm sure they're terribly confused after watching all of this political spin up here. I was criticized last night by Governor Romney for putting my country first. And I just want to remind the people here in New Hampshire and throughout the United States that I think he criticized me while he was out raising money for serving my country in China. Yes, under a Democrat, like my two sons are doing in the United States Navy.
I just think it's most likely that the person who should represent our party running against President Obama is not someone who called him a remarkable leader and went to be his ambassador in China.
This nation is divided, David, because of attitudes like that.
I think that's an historic retort. Alex Wagner, thanks for joining. Alex Wagner, of course, is host of Now, of course, which airs every weekday right around noon Eastern time. In fact, exactly at noon. You know, you're a young commentator and young analyst of the news, and I just got to tell you, first of all, hear your reaction.
I thought it was my favorite moment of the debate. I thought Huntsman was incredibly strong. He has been hammered over and over and over again for having served as ambassador to China, and I thought his response was not only eloquent, but of a piece in terms of New Hampshire, what New Hampshire voters want, and to some degree what the country thinks. I mean, is it such a black mark on his record that he served in the administration? I don't know why all of a sudden we talk about these ideas of public service and serving in government is a bad thing and being a politician is a bad thing. Here's a guy who has incredible foreign policy experience. Yes, he served under a Democratic president, but he knows the Huntsman question has been a huge head scratcher for me. It's great to see that he's rising in some polls. I thought he answered that with confidence and spoke truthfully.
Here's a man with a unique experience in China, probably the most important trading partner we're going to have, the most important competitor in the world, speaks Mandarin, able to go over there and do a job that few other public officials in our history could ever have done, having a language ability in that country. A unique ability to serve his country. He's asked to give that unique training and experience to the country in the interest of the country, and he accepts it.
And I mean, I will say, Huntsman has not done himself a service in some areas in terms of appealing to the Republican base, which he has to doff his hat to in a field like this. I think the constantly dropping Chinese phrases throughout the debates doesn't serve him well. It's a little bit dorky and embarrassing. I think it
wouldn't hurt him on the Democratic side.
No, you're correct. But I think, you know, Huntsman's biggest problem, in my view, is he came out of the gates and he was so gung-ho about being a moderate and being outside of the traditional mold of a Republican, wearing the jean jacket, riding the motocross across the desert, talking about climate change and Captain Beefheart, that he immediately turned off everybody that was ready to dismiss him because he had served under President Obama. And that, I think, to some degree, is why he's never gotten any traction.
In a red-hot political environment where people, maybe 40% of the country, really wants to remove this president, wants to deny him a second term in the worst way, some of them in the very worst way.
Yes.
There's a lot of hatred out there. What do you think it's going to do to him in terms of coming out here on the eve of the New Hampshire primary? Will it get him votes to be the serious man of the middle?
I think it works in New Hampshire. The question is, I mean, you go to South Carolina, it's dirty politics. It's going to be nasty down there. Can John Huntsman even get his head above water? It remains TBD.
You're the best. Thanks, Alex Wagner. Every day at noon.
Thanks, Chris.
Don't miss it. Stay with MSNBC now for our coverage of the Republican presidential candidates debate just held. We're in Manchester just 2 days before the New Hampshire primary. It has finally gotten hot, and we saw it in that debate. They're going after Romney. They're going after dirty ads. They're going after the works. It's finally come to the high noon here in New Hampshire. We'll be right back. What a morning. Welcome back to MSNBC's coverage of the very exciting NBC News debate this morning, the one conducted with Facebook. We're here at our headquarters in Manchester, New Hampshire, where on Tuesday night, coming up in just 2 days, I'll be covering the first in the nation. We'll all be covering the first in the nation primary. Chuck Todd is MSNBC's political director. He joins us now from the debate site in Concord. And here in Manchester with me is Ed Schultz, host of The Ed Show on MSNBC, and the host of MSNBC's The Last Word, Lawrence O'Donnell. So before my colleagues talk, let's go right now to Chuck Todd. Chuck, what a debate. What an amazing change from last night. These candidates were turned on by something this morning. Maybe it was our colleague, David Gregory, but they were ready to fight.
Well, I think you had a couple dynamics going on. I mean, number one, when you realize there are going to be two debates this close together, the last one is probably going to be the one that's going to get the most attention. That's the last word. That's your last chance. So I think both Rick Santorum in particular, and then Newt Gingrich followed suit. I think what was interesting is when David opened the debate and gave the opening there to Speaker Gingrich to go after Governor Romney, he didn't do a very good job. Rick Santorum got his shot, and he went right at him, and then that seemed to wake Newt up. And you could see the two of them jockeying sort of for that position of trying to show themselves as the chief challenger, the chief conservative anti-Romney in this. But, you know, it's still sporadic, this sort of group attack on Romney. None of them have been able to sustain it at any debate, even this one. Yes, at the end, I think Gingrich was able to get one last lick in a little bit, but he had to take his own incoming because he's got this sort of tough, hypocritical position to defend about going after Romney on super PACs, and then his super PAC is clearly going to do pretty much the same thing now that they have some money to do it. And ultimately, what do we have at the end? Romney deflected the best he could, got, I'd say, dinged up a little bit, but nothing that seems to knock him off, because where did they hit him on his conservative credentials? Where did they hit him that's really going to upend him and make South Carolina harder today than it was yesterday? And I think when you look at it in that sense, I don't know if they were able to do enough yet to make inroads in South Carolina.
Yeah, Chuck, well, let me try this by you. They may have taken the armor off. They didn't take the armor off his back, but they took the armor off his front. He's going into a general election, if he wins the nomination, against an incumbent president claiming to be the innocent, the outsider, the pious citizen watching the disorganization of government coming in off the bench. These guys said, no way, you're a pal. You've been a pal for 20 years. Stop being so pious. Cut the baloney. Isn't this going to be useful to people like David Axelrod and Pluff as they plot to plot this guy's demise come November?
Well, and I think it could be useful to a Santorum or a Gingrich, who both of them have been taking this, well, you guys are part of the Washington problem, and they're going, hey, wait a minute, you've been a career political campaigner. You may not have been a career office holder, but you've been a career politician, at least the second half of your life. So in that respect, I think they were able to get that deflection. Let me just bring up one other person here. And granted, I'm grading on a curve. After 14 subpar debates, at least John Huntsman had an above-par debate. You know, he at least got a couple of retorts off, was able to hit him, and if he didn't do it now, there was no other shot to do it. But for the first time, you saw some life in Huntsman and his belief of trying to run as sort of the McCain maverick here. He still doesn't know how to do it, and I still think there's a charisma problem that he has in sort of owning the screen when he gets his moment. You know, John McCain always figured out how to grab his moment when the camera was on. I think Huntsman struggled to do that, but we should be giving him a little bit of credit here. He got a couple of moments, and then for the first time was able to at least set up a contrast with Romney, and even suckered Romney into attacking him, which is really always your goal when you're going after the front runner.
Yeah, you always want to attack from a defensive position, which he did with great regard in that comment. This nation is divided, David Gregory, because of attitudes like that. A direct counterpunch right to the gut of Romney. But by the way, I may disagree with you. I'm looking at these polls. You're looking at them. The ARG poll we'll be talking about here with our colleagues. But there is evidence now that Huntsman is moving perhaps up past Paul to second place. Is that good enough to keep him in this race? Here it is, by the way. A new poll by the American Research Group shows Huntsman now in second up here, 17 points, with Ron Paul at 16. If he can edge out Ron Paul and go into a clear second, knocking out Santorum and Gingrich in the bargain, does he go anywhere after he gets out of New Hampshire? Chuck Todd.
Well, look, I do think the game is 25%. Any of these guys gets 25% here in New Hampshire, and I think that's a number that gives them this clear-cut, hey, I finished second in Romney's home turf. But I'll tell you, I don't have a lot of regard for that poll, ARG. Their reputation is shaky at best. There's other numbers out